Before you call me bitter, at least let me explain. We were cutting a cake in the backyard. Joanne insisted on peach cobbler, even though I'm allergic and I had just handed her a bouquet of fresh lilies. It was her birthday, her first one without her husband. I wanted it to feel special, but instead of a thank you, she turned to me, smiled sweetly, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe next year. You'll finally give us something worth celebrating, a baby." People think betrayal wears a stranger's face, but in my story, it wore a pearl necklace and served lemonade like a saint. Tell me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not the only one who's been told they're not woman enough by the people who should have had their back. I cooked her meals, gave up vacations, stayed silent for years, and this is how she thanked me, by making my infertility the party's main event. I didn't say a word when she said it. Just stood there holding that empty paper plate, my smile frozen like the damn lemonade she made. A few people laughed nervously, politely, like they weren't sure if it was a joke. It wasn't. Joanne never joked when it came to grandbabies or family legacy or fixing what's broken. She liked to say things in front of people because it made them harder to challenge. She had a way of weaving cruelty into compliments, like telling me I had such a good heart right before asking if I'd considered letting Nathan try with someone else. And I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I clap back? Why didn't I throw the lilies at her feet and tell her to go to hell? Because I still believed if I kept being kind, she'd change. That day in the backyard, I cleaned up after the party like I always did. I wrapped the leftover cobbler, stacked the plastic cups, and smiled through the headache that always followed her voice. Nathan saw it. He saw the tension, but he shrugged it off like he always did. She didn't mean it that way. He'd mumble, looking at his phone. She's just old school. Old school. Right, like blaming the woman for everything, including her own body turning against her. It wasn't like I didn't want children. God knows how many nights I cried alone in the bathroom, staring at that single line on the pregnancy test. I did all the right things, ate clean, meditated, prayed, made appointments, but nothing stuck. And the worst part, Nathan never even got tested. He'd always say, "Let's give it another few months, then another, and another." Meanwhile, Joanne kept the countdown. At Sunday dinner, she'd say things like, "Sandra's third one just started preschool." Time really flies, doesn't it? Or, "I was already pregnant with Nathan by your age." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't sweet. It was pressure thick, constant, and humiliating. But I kept hosting, kept smiling, kept folding her laundry even when she'd make comments like, "Must be nice to have time to fold clothes when you don't have kids underfoot." Every time I tried to speak up, Nathan would hold my hand under the table, not in solidarity, more like warning. Like he knew I was about to break, and if I did, the peace would shatter. But there wasn't peace. Not really. There was just me, playing good daughter-in-law while my insides turned raw. Then one morning, Joanne left a sticky note on the fridge. She didn't say good morning, didn't ask how I slept, just left this tiny yellow square with bold black ink, Dr. Patel, Fertility Clinic, 10:30 a.m. Thursday. No more excuses. I read it 3 times before I peeled it off. My hand trembled. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. That Thursday, I went. But not alone. She insisted on coming with me, said Nathan was busy, said I needed guidance. She sat in the consultation room like she owned it, asked the doctor about my hormone levels before I could open my mouth, told the nurse to make sure I got every test available because we can't afford to waste time. As if this womb belonged to her. I sat there, teeth clenched, fists balled in my lap, watching my own life be dissected by a woman who once told me marriage is about knowing your place. When we left, she smiled and said, "Now we're finally getting somewhere." That night, I didn't cry. I got quiet, dead quiet, and for the first time, I opened a browser tab, searched for male fertility testing, and booked an appointment for Nathan. He didn't know yet, but soon he would, and so would she, because I was done. Done letting someone else decide if I was enough. done holding my breath while other people filled the room with poison and called it family. And most of all, I was done apologizing for being a woman who could not make everyone else's dreams come true. I had my own dreams, and starting that night, I planned to protect them. Nathan didn't argue when I told him about the appointment. He looked confused for a moment, then embarrassed, then defensive, like the idea of testing his fertility was some kind of insult. "I'm not the problem, Mara," he said quietly. Avoiding my eyes, I didn't respond. I just placed the appointment card on the kitchen counter and walked away. To his credit, he went. Maybe out of guilt, maybe to shut me up. I didn't care anymore. I just needed facts. A week later, they called. I had the phone on speaker when I answered, standing in the hallway. Nathan was sitting at the table, eating toast like it was any other day. The nurse's voice was calm, too calm, low motility, abnormal morphology. Clinically significant count issues. She might as well have said it in fireworks. Nathan sat still for a moment, then he reached over and turned off the speaker. Like that would erase what we both just heard. I waited. He didn't say sorry, didn't hold me, just rubbed the back of his neck and muttered, "Guess I'll have to cut back on beer." And then he left the room. No apology, no recognition of the 4 years I'd spent carrying the blame. I stood there, hands shaking, staring at the silent phone like it might offer some comfort. It didn't, but I wasn't surprised, not really. What did surprise me was how quickly Joanne shifted when I told her. At first, she acted like she didn't hear me. Then she tried to deflect. Well, those tests aren't always accurate, you know. Then came the real venom. Maybe all that stress from your job messed with his chances. You ever think of that? That's when I knew. There would never be a version of the truth where she didn't blame me, so I stopped offering her one. From that point forward, I said less and watched more. And what I saw was a woman who couldn't stand not having control. She tightened her grip in small ways, reorganizing my kitchen drawers without asking, switching my almond milk with regular dairy, accidentally donating clothes I had stored for later use. One morning, I came down to find her scrubbing the baseboards in her robe like she owned the place. When I said I had it handled, she smiled and said, "Clearly, you don't—" Nathan didn't notice, or didn't want to. Either way, I felt more alone than ever. Until one afternoon, Sandra came over. Joanne had invited her for lunch without telling me. Of course, I walked in from a 12-hour shift to find the two of them sipping wine and laughing in the sunroom. Sandra smiled. "Too sweet. I heard about the tests," she said, like she was discussing weather. "That's tough. But hey, don't give up. I'm sure there are other ways." She paused, looked at her mom, maybe a surrogate or even adoption. Some women just aren't meant to carry. She said it like she was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful for the suggestion. My hands clenched so hard. I left nail marks on my palm. I didn't respond. I just excused myself, went upstairs, and shut the door. And that night, I opened a drawer and pulled out the tiny box I'd kept hidden for months. Inside was a neatly folded copy of our house deed. My grandmother left the property to me years before I met Nathan, and thank God I'd never added his name. It was mine, all of it. And the only reason Joanne had a roof over her head was because I let her. So I started planning, quietly, methodically, without the drama they were so addicted to. I opened a second bank account, changed the passwords to all the streaming services. I even took pictures of every piece of furniture because I knew, when push came to shove, Joanne would try to take something on her way out. But the most important thing I did, I bought a small voice recorder. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a toxic family is proof. The recorder was small, the kind you could tuck inside a folded towel or slide between couch cushions. I started carrying it in my purse, just in case. I never wanted to be the kind of person who recorded people behind their backs, but after what Joanne said in the hallway that Tuesday morning, I knew I needed it. She didn't know I was home. She was on the phone probably with Sandra. Her voice was sharper than usual. "Mara's just not maternal. That's the problem. I gave her 4 years. 4. I told Nathan he should have picked someone with better instincts. I froze in place. One foot still on the stairs. No, she hasn't left yet, but once I get my name on the utilities, I'll make sure she's too uncomfortable to stay. This house needs a real family in it. That was the first moment I felt something snap. Not just break snap, not because she was plotting. I already knew she was manipulative. Not because she thought I didn't deserve my own home. It was because she said it with such ease. Like I wasn't even a person. Just a mistake her son made. That night, I downloaded the audio, clipped it, labeled it, and backed it up in 3 different places. The next morning, I made her coffee just like always. She smiled, like she hadn't just tried to erase me. "Morning, sweetheart." She chirped. I smiled back. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. You don't need to yell to win, you just need to wait. So I did. I waited while she continued her subtle little missions, moving photos off the mantle, offering to cook meals Nathan liked, never asking what I preferred, saying things like, "You really should take more vitamins." "Mara, you're looking pale." And I let her. Because now, I had a folder, a digital one, full of quotes, recordings, bank screenshots, property records, all time-stamped, all organized. Nathan, bless his heart, was still stuck in peacekeeper mode. Whenever he noticed tension, he'd deflect with a joke or scroll through his phone like the conversation wasn't happening. But I saw something change in him too. When I caught a cold and stayed in bed one weekend, he offered to cook. Joanne said loud enough for me to hear from the bedroom, "She's probably just worn down." That happens when your body isn't used to real work. Nathan didn't laugh. He didn't say anything. But later, he brought me tea and asked if I was okay. And I knew then he was starting to see it. I just needed one final moment, one undeniable piece. It came 2 weeks later, at dinner. Joanne had invited a cousin over, someone from her side, someone who barely knew me. We were sitting around the table. The cousin asked casually, "So, when are the babies coming?" Joanne didn't even flinch. She leaned in and said, "Well, we did all the testing and the doctor says she's not able. It's a shame, really. But maybe there's still hope through other means." I dropped my fork. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because the recorder was in my sweater pocket, and I knew this would be the last thing it needed to capture. I excused myself, walked to the living room, and sat quietly while they laughed and carried on. The next morning, I emailed the full file over 10 hours of recorded material to myself, Nathan, and my attorney. Yes, I had an attorney. I'd contacted her a week before, told her the house was mine, that I wanted to formally file for Joanne's eviction under property law. She said I had more than enough. All I had to do was sign, so I did. I signed the papers, placed them neatly in an envelope, and left them on Joanne's seat at the kitchen table. No arguments, no yelling, just black and white reality. She wasn't entitled to this home. She wasn't welcome in this marriage. And she had run out of places to hide her cruelty. She didn't touch the envelope until after her morning walk. I watched her from the kitchen window, same pink track jacket, same judgmental scowl aimed at the neighbors. When she finally opened it, I saw her eyes move fast across the first page. She looked up at me. I didn't say a word. She blinked twice. "Set the papers down. You're making a mistake," she said, her voice even. "No," I replied, calm as the coffee in my mug. "I'm correcting one. Joanne tried everything in her arsenal after that. First, she played dumb. Pretended she didn't know what an eviction was, insisted that this is just a misunderstanding. Then she turned to Nathan, who had been silent the whole morning. "Nathan, tell her this is absurd. I'm your mother." He didn't answer right away, and when he did, he surprised both of us. "This isn't my house," he said quietly. "It never was. It belongs to Mara." Joanne's face changed. Her jaw tightened. "I gave up everything to be close to you," she hissed. "I left my life behind. I gave you 4 years. I couldn't help but smile." 4 years, I said, slowly. That's exactly how long I was blamed for something that wasn't my fault. She stood. Her chair screeched across the tile. "This is betrayal," she snapped. I stood too. "No," I said. "Steady. Betrayal is telling people I'm infertile when you knew the truth. Betrayal is planning to push me out of my own home. Betrayal is lying about who you are while hiding behind the word family." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Good, that was the point. Because I wasn't the same woman who tiptoed around her moods. I wasn't the woman who apologized for things I didn't do. I was done shrinking. Nathan offered to help her pack. She declined. Said she'd rather stay with her cousin for a while until this all blows over. It didn't. My attorney made sure the paperwork was airtight. She had 30 days to vacate the property, and I made it clear there'd be no extensions. During those weeks, the air in the house shifted. Joanne stopped speaking to me directly, left passive-aggressive notes instead, told mutual friends I'd lost my mind, that I was unstable. I didn't respond. Because when someone is drowning in their own lies, the worst thing you can do is throw them a rope. Instead, I cleaned the guest room after she moved her things, changed the locks the same afternoon she left, removed the photos she'd stuck on the hallway walls, reclaimed my home inch by inch. Nathan and I had some hard conversations after that. There were tears, silence, nights spent on opposite sides of the bed, but slowly, painfully. He started to see what I'd been carrying. He listened to the recordings, all of them. I remember one moment in particular. He paused the audio, stared at the screen, and whispered, "She really said that about you." I nodded, and he cried. I didn't, because by then, I was dry. The following week, Nathan made a quiet but powerful gesture. He added me to the deed on his own family's cabin upstate, a place I never asked for, never visited, never claimed. "I want you to know I'm on your side now," he said, in writing. It wasn't a fix, but it was a start, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. Joanne never called to apologize, but she did call Nathan a month after she left, said she was staying with Sandra now, said she hoped things settled down soon. He handed me the phone. I didn't take it. "Instead," I said, loud enough for her to hear on speaker, "I hope so too." Then I walked into my living room, sat on my own couch, and lit the candle she once called cheap. It smelled like lavender and freedom. The silence in our home wasn't immediate peace. It came slowly, like the dust settling after a long, bitter storm. For a while, I still expected to hear her footsteps in the hallway, the squeak of that one stair she refused to fix. The sound of her humming hymns in the kitchen just loud enough to remind me she was there. But the quiet was real, and it was mine. I started waking up earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I lit a candle, made coffee how I liked it, not weak like she used to make, and opened the windows. I could finally breathe without bracing for criticism. Nathan softened, too. He started joining me in the mornings, sometimes bringing me wildflowers he picked up from the grocery store. Small gestures, but they mattered. One Saturday, we took a drive to the cabin upstate, the one he put my name on. I walked barefoot across the porch, touched the weathered wood, and felt something in me loosen like a knot that had been tied so long. I forgot it was there. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," he said. "You weren't supposed to," I replied. She made sure of that. He nodded. No excuses, just truth. And that's all I ever wanted. Truth. Not perfection, not pity. Just someone willing to say, "Yes, this happened, and it was wrong." Joanne never reached out again. Not to me, but I heard from a neighbor months later that she tried living with Sandra long-term, and it didn't go well. Apparently, Sandra doesn't like passive aggression unless she's the one serving it. They had a falling out over something petty. I'm sure, a casserole dish, a thermostat setting, a shared mirror. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. Joanne had nowhere left to control. She couldn't rewrite the past anymore, couldn't retell the story with me as the villain, because I kept the evidence. I made the choices. And for once, I didn't ask anyone's permission. Some days, I still hear her voice in my head, that constant echo of, when are you going to give us something worth celebrating? And you know what I did? I gave myself back to myself. I gave Nathan a version of me that didn't live under someone else's judgment. I gave our home a second chance at peace. And that was worth celebrating. I still don't know if I'll ever have a child, and I've made peace with that, because I don't measure my worth by a womb. I measure it by the boundaries I set, the love I protect, the life I build, and the woman I've become. She's not quiet anymore, not invisible, not sorry. She is whole, she is real, and she is finally home. If this story reached you, if it reminded you of a room you once tiptoed through, or a voice you tried to outlove, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, because someone else needs to know they're not alone either. And if you're still holding your breath for peace, exhale. It starts when you stop apologizing for existing.